Hello guys, this is Flanker. In this video we will talk about a heavily debated topic, the caravan system and its balance. After watching the latest development update livestream, many members of the Ashes of Creation community expressed concerns about the unfairly high risks for the defenders of caravans and the seemingly minimal risks for the attackers. But is this actually true, or there is more than meets the eye? Before we dive into it, I would appreciate it if you could like this video and subscribe to the channel. First of all, let's keep in mind two important things. The caravan system is still a work in progress, as Steven always reminds us. Secondly, our worries may, and most likely are, based on what we saw during the stream, and that was a pre-planned scenario.
The numbers weren't even purposely so, right? I mean, guys, remember, part of this demonstration is to show off certain systems. So yes, a lot of these things are kind of run of show. We're intended to defeat them. We're intended to take their stuff. We're intended to transition to the raft. That's the intent, right? And so don't get too harsh on the defending side. They were purposefully outnumbered. We even changed their composition not to let them have too many healers. So it was unfortunate for them.
Initially, players have two options: sell the commodities at their node or put them in a caravan and deliver them to another node. The first option has no risk, but the reward isn't that impressive. The second option has a significantly higher reward, but the risks are there as well. For example, you can earn 5 times more gold by delivering salt-cured meat from Winstead to the adjacent node, and it looks like a pretty good deal and definitely worth the risk. But what exactly makes people hesitate when it comes to taking that risk despite having a decent potential return on investments? Let's take a look at it from a psychological perspective. There are 3 crucial bullet points that I would like to mention and clarify. The first one is uncertainty avoidance, which is a psychological phenomenon where people, or players in this case, feel discomfort or anxiety about uncertain or unknown situations. This fear can often drive people to seek predictability and avoid unfamiliar scenarios, which is basically close to impossible when it comes to caravans. Even though it's natural to feel this way, it is still possible to overcome it, and we will talk about it in a moment. The second one is loss aversion bias, which is a tendency for people to prefer avoiding losses over acquiring equivalent gains. It's a key concept in behavioral economics, suggesting that the pain of losing is psychologically about twice as powerful as pleasure of gaining. For example, losing $100 feels more upsetting than the joy of finding $100. What makes it even more psychologically painful, for some players I guess, is not only the loss of their cargo, but the fact that it has been taken from them by some bad guys. Finally, let's not forget about negativity bias. It's another phenomenon where negative events, emotions, or interactions have a much greater effect on our psychological state than neutral or even positive things. In simple terms, negative experiences weigh more heavily on our minds than positive ones. So what can we do about it? Understanding the nature and essence of biases is the first step towards neutralizing them. Additionally, knowledge is power, and there are certain things you should be aware of and act upon accordingly. Here are the 4 things that I would recommend you to keep in mind. Have a solid decision-making process during the caravan preparation. Random chaotic decisions lead to random chaotic outcomes. On the other hand, having a solid strategy can minimize the risk and increase your success rate from, let's say, 70% to 90%. And we'll talk about specific measures that can be taken to minimize the risk shortly. Have realistic expectations. You need to understand and accept the fact that launching 100 caravans and expecting all of them to arrive safely is somewhat optimistic. I mean, it's not impossible, of course, if you have 300 players escorting all those caravans, for example, but let's be honest, how rational would that be? Understand the dispersion of outcomes. If you have, for example, an 80% success rate, it means that on average, 1 caravan out of 5 ends up getting raided, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be every 5th caravan. It's entirely possible that you may get lucky 15 times, or quite the opposite, get raided 3 times in a row. But it's not a reason to book a therapy session, it may be just an unfortunate set of circumstances. However, reviewing your strategy after such cases might be an option to consider. And in fact, even if 1 or 2 caravans out of 5 are lost, you still make profit. Accept the reality. Those parts of reality that we understand and fully accept no longer have any control over us. After all, it's a game. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Alright, the boring part is finally over, and now we're getting to the most important question: how to keep the risk of getting raided as low as possible. The first idea is the most obvious one: to have as many defenders as you possibly can. If you plan to deliver goods from node A to node B, ask yourself a question. Who do I usually meet on my way there? Is it solo players in small groups, or there is a chance to accidentally stumble upon a raid because there is a boss nearby that is about to respawn? And if it's the case, then it would definitely make sense to choose another route. Planning the route beforehand is another key component of a good strategy. In general, the faster you get to the destination point, the lower the risk. You don't want to end up getting lost in the middle of the forest, desperately trying to figure out where should you go next. Another idea that sounds rational to me is to send a couple of scouts prior to departing, make them patrol the route and warn you about potential threats. You won't have to deal with problems that you managed to avoid, and having intel may end up being extremely helpful. Also, let's not forget that the number of online players on your server will change throughout the day. In my opinion, it makes perfect sense to launch caravans in slow hours because the chance of unexpected encounters will be lower. Moreover, during the last livestream, Steven mentioned another trick that can be used.
Can you send out an empty caravan as a decoy? Is that an option?
Yes, you can. However, there are visual indicators on what the caravan might be carrying versus how full it might be. And so in order to effectively create decoy caravans, there is progression that's allotted through one of our social organizations. One of our social organizations have the ability to provide unique vendor lists and craft lists of crates that can be empty but look full. And so if you want to advance in that particular social organization, you could then create decoy caravans more effectively, as well as decoy merchant ships.
Decoy caravans may be used to test new routes, for example if you just relocated from one node to another. Alternatively, if you have a certain amount of cargo, you may split it and make 2 rounds instead of 1. Sometimes it may be a good idea not to put all your eggs in one basket. And one more tip, if something is about to go wrong or you feel that there is something suspicious, nothing stops you from turning the caravan back and returning to your node of departure. I'm pretty sure that in certain situations it might make much more sense to try launching another caravan later. Finally, don't forget that players will not only have a reason to attack your caravan, but also to defend it. If you escort a caravan with your party and meet a solo player or a small group, it makes little to no sense for them to attack you because they are outnumbered. Instead, it makes much more sense for them to join your caravan as defenders, and in fact, nothing stops you from asking them to do so. Now let's take a look at the attacker side, and when it comes to them, I understand why many people had the impression that there is no risk or investment for the attacking side, and I don't think it is actually true. From the defender's point of view, they're peacefully traveling, then suddenly getting jumped, and that's it. But there is way more than meets the eye, and you may not see the whole picture. First of all, it takes time to find a caravan, and we don't know how easy that is yet. Gathering relevant intel by planting moles in other guilds also requires certain efforts. And even if you have the information, you still have to be in the right place at the right time, while also staying under the radar, and that requires a certain level of cooperation. The next phase is actually fighting the defenders. On the livestream, it took 1.5 minutes, even though there were 25 attackers against 10 defenders without healers. If that was a fair fight, it would take way more time, and who knows, maybe it would be enough for the cavalry to arrive and save the day. And that's in case if the attackers win, because that's also not guaranteed. But let's imagine the attackers manage to wipe the defenders. Part of the cargo is already lost upon the destruction of the caravan. At this point, there are 2 possible scenarios: loot the boxes or summon a caravan. The first option is obviously safer, but also means losing another part of the cargo due to the existing item sync system. In addition to that, stolen commodities are less valuable and can only be sold at nodes with a black market service building. So here is a rhetorical question: what if the mayors of nearby nodes decided not to build them to discourage caravan raiding? The second option is summoning a caravan, and now the roles switch. Until it arrives, and actually let's not forget that a lonely caravan can be destroyed on its way, previous defenders may return and bring some reinforcements. And if it's not the case, well, there is still a chance to get counter-raided by a third party. One more important factor to take into account is how rational it is to raid a caravan. What I mean by that is, let's say there's a group of 20 players that want to raid a caravan, and each player can potentially farm 10 gold per hour. It means that the expected profit of their raids should be equal to or more than 200 gold per hour. Otherwise, it doesn't make much sense. So basically, one of the main risks for attackers is to simply waste their time. What's the point of earning less when you can earn more while keeping your reputation clean. But flanker, some people may say, there will be role players who don't care about the profit, they just love raiding, and that would be a totally fair statement. However, there will be also role players or maybe even mercenaries who prefer to be on the bright side, wouldn't you agree? Generally speaking, a successful raid is a chain of events, and every single event from that chain should turn out in the attacker's favor. Also, let's not forget that receiving supplies from other nodes is extremely important. If you're a mayor and your node can't develop further because many incoming caravans are getting raided, chances are you and your guild will do something about it. For example, securing the main roads or organizing a rapid response team. A few things that I would like to say in conclusion. First of all, I'm pretty sure that the caravan system may end up getting balanced naturally. If it will be too easy to raid a caravan, there will be fewer caravans, or they will be protected much better. This will make raids boring and way more challenging, and after some time, players who are not capable of doing that will just stop. As a result, the safety level will increase and more players will start launching the caravans again. My prediction is that it will end up working in a similar way to supply and demand. Finally, as I have written in one of my comments, Steven is maintaining a pretty good balance between listening to players and standing his ground. And at this point, I have full trust in his vision. I hope you found this video interesting and helpful. If so, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to my channel. If you don't have an Ashes of Creation account yet, feel free to support the channel by making one using my referral link in the description of this video. And thank you for watching. I am Flanker, and I'll see you soon.